Alright, so we're going to start the Brick Breaker game today. First thing we need to do is go over the Brick Breaker elements, which I pulled directly from our game design document. So, we need a bat, right? We called it the bat instead of the paddle, but we need a bat. And that's going to be both a sprite and an object in our game. We need a ball, which is also going to be a sprite and an object. We need a brick, which is going to be a sprite and an object. We need power-ups, which will be a sprite and an object. Our levels will be the rooms that we'll fill with bricks, and we'll put the bat and the ball in the room so that we can play the game. And then we need scoring, lives, and game over. And the difference with this project as opposed to the last one is that this project we will be creating an object to control these things that will not have a sprite. So it's just going to be an object that works behind the scenes just to do scoring, to do lives, and handle game over. Okay? So that's a new thing this time around. Last time we did all of that inside of one of the objects we already had. So that was not a consideration. We had all the objects we had sprites. This time around, not all the objects are going to have sprites. Only some will have, well, almost all of them will have sprites. Just that one that'll be an object that we will be creating just for scoring lives and game over. Okay? So today's goal is to understand how to create sprites by creating the bat and the ball. So I'm going to get those both done today so that we can move forward tomorrow with the bricks and bouncing the ball off of walls. So we're going to start the ball moving, we're going to get the bat moving, keep the bat on the screen, things like that. Okay? But when you look at the learning target says learning to create sprites. That's because the new learning is creating sprites in GameMaker. At this point, having gone through one whole game, we should know a variety of things. We should know how to create a new sprite and a new object. We should know how to set sprite and object properties. We should know how to change room properties. We should know how to respond to events. And we should know how to add objects to rooms. Okay, those are all things we learned in the previous project. The new learning for today anyway, and it's not just for the whole project, but for today, is creating sprites. That is the only thing that's adding on to what we have already done, and it's the only thing that's new really in what we're doing. There might be some new commands, but the new commands are related to movement, so they're new ways to do movement, not really new ideas. So today, here's what we have to do. We want to create the bat. So we got to create a sprite, create an object, make it move. That is, respond to user input with keyboard. With the ball, same thing. Create a sprite, create the object, make it move. This time we're making it move when we press spacebar. And knowing what we know about pressing things, we'll be able to better choose which keyboard event we use instead of the same one that we've been using. Okay? So that's it in terms of what our tasks are. And I'm going to leave the tasks up while we work so that we kind of know where we're going and that we can check them off as we go. So now we're going to go ahead and let's go into GameMaker. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my Start menu, scroll down to G, open GameMaker Studio 2. I tried to get everybody's new version installed. I didn't quite finish, as you can tell by the different stickies around. But I'm getting there. So I'm hoping by tomorrow you'll have, if you don't have it yet, you'll have the newer version of GameMaker because the new version just came out. Okay. So once this comes up, and I guess I'll transition the projector to projecting my screen that you'll be able to see. Okay, there it is. We're going to create a new game. We're going to create a new drag and drop, and we're going to give it a name that's going to be appropriate for this game. You can call it kind of whatever you want to call it in terms of brick breaking. I'm going to call mine break bricks, just to be different. Okay? Whatever you call it, doesn't matter. It's going to save the file. Click save, and it'll open up a new game for you. A reminder that when you open a new game, when you start a new game, you'll always have a room. So, if you haven't had the new version installed, don't worry about it. Ignore the new version and just go ahead and work with what we got. But right now we should see this screen where we're blank except for we got rooms highlighted because we have one room. You know, we always have one room. And we're going to start by creating a sprite. Okay. So we right click on sprite, select create sprite. This is the bat sprite, so we're going to call it lowercase spr and then capitalize bat. Okay. I'm just going to click save. A reminder that the bat is going to be pretty wide. We want it to be wide enough to be useful for the player. We don't want it to be too thin. So I'm going to resize it, but we're only going to resize one dimension. So I'm going to click on the resize sprite button. I'm going to click the resize canvas button. And I'm just going to change the height from 64 to 16. I'm going to leave the width at 64. So our sprite, that sprite will be 64 wide, 16 tall. So click apply. And that will change the size you can see in the preview. Last time when we created sprites, we had our sprites already created for us. We just had to import them. This time around, we're making sprites. So in order to make a sprite, I need to click Edit Image to go into the image editor. Okay? This is what you see in the image editor. It's like a lot of other image editors. You got a bunch of colors here. We get a bunch of tools here. We have our canvas here, and then we have a preview up here. Okay? So we're going to create this bat just using a rounded rectangle, because that's what we said in our game design document. Right? In terms of style, scrolling down here, the bat is just going to be a rounded rectangle. Okay? Now, if I look at my tools, there are no rounded rectangle tools. There is a rectangle tool, but not a rounded rectangle tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a rectangle tool. I'm going to make a rectangle, then I'm just going to cut off the corners. That'll make it rounded. Okay? So here's what we're going to do. We are going to click on the rectangle tool, but you notice there's two sides to it. There's an upper left and a lower right. The upper left is outline and the lower right is filled. We want the outline for now. So I'm going to click on the upper left corner of the rectangle tool to get the outline. And then I'm going to select a suitable color. I'm going to use white to really make it stand out. And then I'm going to draw a rectangle. I'm going to start in the upper left, click and drag to the lower right. So there's my rectangle. I can make it rounded by clicking the eraser tool and just erasing the corners. That's all I'm going to do. And you'll have to move your cursor to see that you've erased. But that's good enough to be considered a rounded rectangle. Okay? That's what I mean by rounded rectangle, is the rectangle is rounded at the corners. Okay? We'll do something similar for the power-ups, but we're going to do like fully rounding the sides on the power-ups. This is just a rounded rectangle. Now we need to fill it with a color. You can probably use any color. I like green. I'm going to fill it with a green. You can fill it with whatever color you want, but that's the color I'm going to use, is green. So if you want to follow along with me specifically, it was this green here, in case you're wondering. But any green will really do. What matters most is that it's the right size and that it's a rounded rectangle. Okay. At this point, the bat sprite is done. Okay. So with the bat sprite being done, I can click the X here. I don't need to click any save or anything. It automatically saves, so I just click the X to get out of the editor. And you see our sprite now appears in the preview in the sprite window. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that we can see this. Because the last thing we're going to do is reset the origin. I'm going to set the origin to middle center. Okay? There's multiple reasons for this, not the least of which is that it makes it easier to place it in the room. I can place it more accurately in the center to begin. But it's also just typically with a lot of these things, using middle center is a good way to use your origin. And a good origin to use. Okay? So, at this point, this is what it should look like. You have the bat sprite, SPR bat. It is 64 by 16. We drew it to be a rounded rectangle, filled in, and the origin is in the middle center. I'm not going to check the preview mask because I'm pretty sure the preview mask is just a rectangle around the bat. Okay. Now also something unique to this project that we're going to do differently is I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to go right to the object for the bat. So rather than go through let's make all the sprites, we're actually going to go sprite, object, and so on. So we're going to actually finish out the bat right now. That's the next step. I'm going to add the bat object. So let's add a bat object. Right click on objects, create object. Okay, this now is obj bat. I'm always remembering that my prefixes tell me what type of thing it is. So obj for object, and it's the bat. So its name is bat, but we call it obj bat. And of course, I'm going to change the sprite to the bat sprite. Okay. And now we need to make the bat move when I press the left and right keys, because according to our game design document, that was what our movement was going to be. Player controls the bat using left and right arrows to move left and right respectively. So back to the game. Add event. We're doing key down again. And I'll do a key down left. Okay. I'm just going to move left. Moving left, remember, affects the X variable. If it affects the X variable, I'm just going to use an assign variable block. So I click the assign variable. It's the one that has the arrow pointing down at the letters VAR. The variable I'm going to change to X because it's just the X variable of the bat. I'm going to change the value this time to -7. Oops, pushed the wrong button. -7. And I'm going to click relative because remember, clicking relative changes from setting that value to the, or setting that variable to the value, to adding the value to the variable. So instead of changing the X coordinate to -7, we're adding -7 to the X coordinate, which means we'll move 7 pixels to the left. And let's do the same thing with the right. So add event, key down, right, assign variable, X, +7, and click relative. So the only difference between these two is the sign. For the key down left, -7 to move left. For the key down right, +7 to move right. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and test it, and we're going to move the bat along the bottom of the screen. Okay, so let's go to the room because I need to add the bat to the room. Okay, so I double clicked on the room to go to the room. While we're at it, we might as well just resize the room and get the grid set up for our game. So our room, in this game, we're going to change the room size. We're going to go by a standard room size of 640 by 480. So 640 wide, 480 tall. Okay, it's a pretty standard size. Right now, our grid is set up as 32 pixels square. Okay, we are not going to use a square grid on this. We're going to use a rectangular grid. Here's why. The bricks are going to be rectangular. In order to line the bricks up better, we need to make it, basically we're going to make the grid the same size as the rectangle, or as the bricks. So I'm going to click on the grid options. Grid X I'm going to leave at 32, but grid Y I'm going to change it to 16. Remember, these numbers, the numbers 32 and 16 represent how many pixels before I draw a new grid line. So for X, how many pixels to the right do I go before I draw another vertical grid line? For Y, how many pixels do I move up or down before I draw another horizontal grid line? So you see the grid changes from that square grid to now this rectangular grid. And with that, it's going to be set up though for our bricks, because our bricks will be 32 by 16. So when I place the bricks, it'll be easier to place them on screen because one brick will fit inside of each cell in the grid. And then I just need to bring a bat in there. So I'm going to click and drag over a bat. Okay, and I'm going to drag it close to the middle center, or to the center, but near the bottom. Okay, and at this point I'm ready to test. So I'm going to click the play button or the run button to test. So I move left and right when I press the left and right keys. Now, anybody try to move the bat off the screen? Can you move the bat off the screen? Say yes? Yes. Right? Bat doesn't move off the screen. The bat is not supposed to move off the screen, but it does currently. And that's a problem. Because we said we're not doing that. We are supposed to be keeping the bat on the screen at all times. Because the game's going to be played in this screen, so we might as well keep it on the screen. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and exit. And stop. And we're going to return to the bat object. So I'm going to go back to the workspace. And we're going to fix our key down left and right. And really, it's not a problem. It's just not giving us the desired outcome, which is keep the bat on the screen. Okay? Now, like last time, we aren't going to say stop when you get to the wall, or stop when you get to the side. What we're really going to do is we're going to say, as long as we can move to the side, then let's move. If we can't move to the side, then don't move. So I'm going to use an if statement to do that, because I want to do one thing if a certain condition is true, and I want to not do anything if the condition is false. Okay? So I'm going to add an if variable right above the assigned variable. Okay? And I'm going to use my x coordinate again, so I'm going to check, is the variable x? And we're going to do greater than, and here's why. I want to move if I'm not touching the left-hand side. So if I'm not touching the left-hand side, I want to move sideways. If I'm not touching the left-hand side, then my x has to be greater than 0. Is that better? Okay. So if the x value is greater than 0, that means my bat is not at the left-hand side of the screen. If it's not at the left-hand side of the screen, I want to go ahead and move. So I need to move my assigned variable to the right of the if variable so that they are connected, right? So that if the variable, if this is true, then the variable's gonna, or the bat's gonna move to the left. I'm gonna do the same thing with the right. The difference is, of course, I'm not going to compare using a greater than, I'm going to use a less than because we're going to be at the right edge instead of the left edge. So I'm going to click on the key down right. I'll zoom into this one as well. Okay, we're going to add the if variable above the assigned variable. Change variable to x. This time we're going to change this to less rather than greater. Now, I know our width is 640. I'm fully aware of that. However, I think I want to be prepared just in case we decide to change the size of the room for some reason. Doesn't mean we will, but it means I want to be prepared in that case. There is a built-in variable that gives you the width of the room. It's called room underscore width. And there it is. You can hit enter once you get to that point, and it'll give you room width. The room width is just giving you the value that you put in for the width of the room. So in our case, we put in 640. It's going to give us 640. And I'm using less than because I'm on the right-hand side now. And if I'm less than 640, I want to go ahead and still move to the right. So again, move the assigned variable to the right of that if so that they are connected. And here's what the final set of code looks like. So if x is greater than 0, then move left. If x is less than the room width, move right. Okay, you guys ready to try it out? Let's try it out. And then we're going to try to move off the screen when we try it out. I kind of move off the screen, but I move halfway off the screen. So I'm still moving off the screen a little bit, but not the whole way. So I do stop, because I can't go any more left, and if I go to the right, I can't go any more right. But I'm still not really staying on the screen, because the half of the bat is going off the screen. If half the bat is going off the screen, that doesn't count as staying on the screen. I need to fix it so that the whole bat, or almost the whole bat, stays on the screen. So what I'd rather do is I'd rather make it so that instead of checking the center, which is what my x and y coordinates are for this, because remember we set the origin to middle center. If we set the origin to middle center, the x and y coordinates refer to the exact center of that sprite. I really want to check, is my left-hand side touching the left-hand side of the screen? Is the right-hand side of the bat touching the right-hand side of the screen? So I'm going to click this and close this, and we're going to fix that now. So there is, as you know, there is a mask that goes over the sprite that shows the is where we detect collisions. Okay? It's also known as the bounding box. The bounding box is just that space, the edge of the sprites, right? There are 4 bounding box variables that I can use: left, right, top, and bottom. To get, in the case of left and right, it'd be an x coordinate of the left-hand side or the right-hand side of the sprite. For top and bottom, it would be a y coordinate that gives me the top or the bottom. Okay, it's one of the instance variables. So I need to use this command, which is get instance variable. I'm going to bring that out above the if now. Because now I can get, if I scroll down, click the drop down and scroll down to where it says bounding box left. There it is. Bounding box left is the x coordinate of the left side of the bat. So I bring the get instance variable out above the if. I change the variable to bounding box left. I'm going to change the target. I'm going to call it left. Target just means it's a variable that I can store, or that I can store that value in, either for a while, or I'm going to, in this case, I don't want it for more than just this action. So I'm going to click temp, because I don't want to check other than when I push left. So get instance variable, change the variable to bounding box left, change the target to left, click temp for a temporary variable. In the if, I need to change the variable from x to this left variable. So now it's going to grab the left bounding box x coordinate. It's going to check that and see, is that greater than 0? Because if that's greater than 0, then we can move. We're going to do the same thing for right. So get instance variable above the if, change it to bounding box left, change the target to left, click temp. In the if, change variable to left. Yeah, you gotta be careful with that one. Get, not set. And do the same thing for key down right. Add a get instance variable above the if, change it to bounding box right, change the variable target to right, click temp, and then change this variable to right. So what should happen is it should no longer go off the screen, or at least not as far off the screen as we used to. So if I click run, what should happen is I could move to the left and I can move to the right, but I'm going to stay basically on the screen. And I move to the left and I move to the right, and you'll notice a little bit of your bat will go off the screen. And that's not for any other reason besides the fact that we use 7 and our width of the screen is not divisible by 7, so we're off a little bit. I can handle that as opposed to going halfway off the screen or going fully off the screen. Okay? So, halfway means you're using your x instead of, you're comparing with your x instead of your bounding box left or right. If it's going halfway off, it means you're using the x coordinate as where you're checking instead of the bounding box left or right. So we want to make sure that after we added the get instance variable, we stored it in a target. We need to use that target in the if. Okay, and that's usually what it is if you didn't change the if to match the target that you stored your variable value in. Okay, that's ready. We got to do the ball next. Is everybody good with the bat? Yes.
Okay, so the if variable for value on the left, would it be rootless? Leave it as 0.
For the value, it needs to be room width. Because the value we're checking against, right, on the left-hand side of the screen is 0. On the right-hand side of the screen is going to be whatever the room width is. So when I'm doing my check, I need to check against which variable I'm comparing it to. So if I'm moving right, I want to see, is my right bounding box less than the room width? Because if it is, I can move right. I get space to move right. If it's not, I can no longer move right, and therefore I'm going to not going to move at all. Okay. All right. Are we ready to make the ball? Okay. And maybe if I have some time after we finish with the ball, I'll come back and do some troubleshooting. But I'd like to get the ball done right now. So I'm going to go back up here, and I'm actually going to create another sprite. And this sprite is going to be the ball. Okay. The ball is basically just going to be a circle. We're going to shrink this down, though. So I'm going to resize this from 64 by 64 to 16 by 16. Okay. It's going to be small enough to be useful. It'll be able to be seen pretty well. And you can see that's what it looks like when you... So that's 16 by 16 there. Okay. Then I'm going to edit the image. Once I've got it down to 16 by 16, we can edit and make a circle. Okay. Now there's another tool called the ellipse tool, just like the rectangle tool, that I can draw an ellipse, and I can choose to draw it outline, or I can draw it as filled in. I'm going to go ahead and draw another outline. So I'm going to click the outline. This time, though, I'm going to use black for the outline. And then go to the upper left corner, click and drag to the lower right. And then I'm going to make this a nice bright color. I'm going to use a yellow. And click your fill tool and just fill it with yellow. Okay. Yep, just like that. Okay. You can fill it with whatever color you want. I'm filling mine with yellow. Okay. Once you've got that, we can click out of there. Change the origin to middle center. I resized the canvas. So I did that before. So the difference is it's not that big of a deal either way. Resizing the canvas, as long as it's resized to 16 by 16, scaling versus resizing is going to have an effect if you already have an image. So if you already have an image, scaling will actually stretch it, whereas changing the resizing the canvas is going to cause it to actually cut off some of the canvas itself. Okay. So let's add a ball object. We need to add the ball object, and we're going to start this moving, and we want it to move in a random direction when we begin. So we're going to create the ball object. Click. Set the ball's object, set the ball's sprite to the ball sprite. And we're going to add an event. We're going to call the event, we're going to use key pressed instead of key down this time. And here's why. Key pressed registers when you push the key down once. Key down registers when you push and hold. We only want this to happen when we push down once. So I'm going to go to key pressed, and I'm going to select space. Okay. So to make the ball move in a random direction, we need to use a random number. Okay. Now there's a multi-step process to using a random number because the reality is computers don't generate true random numbers. They generate what we call pseudo-random numbers. And that's because the computer is running an algorithm that generates the number. Therefore, if two computers start with the same value and are running the same algorithm, they will get the same random number. Okay? So we have to do one thing before that so that we get this to run differently every time. So I'm going to scroll down in my toolbox. Scroll down. Right. Here's the random area. We see the regular die, that's get a random number. But we need this one first, which is the randomize command. So I'm going to randomize. All you need to do is drag that out. You drag it out, randomize. This will reset the seed value for my random number that I'm going to select next. So you just pull out a randomize, and then I'm going to pull a get random number out. And this time, well, we'll leave it as decimal. Okay. The minimum value I'm going to use, I'm going to make it basically from 45 to 135. So starting at the two perfectly diagonal angles. So we're going to go 45 for the minimum, 135 for the maximum. I am going to store this. It's going to be in target dir for direction, because direction is a built-in variable, so I can't use it. So I'm using dir, and I'm storing it as a temporary variable because I'm only using it for the current direction. There, that's zooming in. Now, in order for the ball to actually move in this direction, I got to do two things. I've got to set the direction, then I got to make it move in that direction. So I'm going to go back up to my movement, which is all the way at the top. I'm going to set the direction variable by clicking and dragging that over. dir for direction. So we picked a random number, stored it in dir for direction. We're setting the direction variable to dir. Then we just need to set the speed. As a direction speed, I'm going to set it to 3. And we'll see if it works. Okay, well luckily you'll have the video that I'll put on today. Oops, I need the ball. Key press. Here we go. See if I can get this done before everybody decides that it's time to go, because I haven't said anything about going yet. Okay, so now when I press space, it moves. Okay, now, well yeah, we haven't done anything with like bouncing, right? That's all I wanted to get to today though. Okay, so we're going to make it bounce tomorrow. Now, we're also going to make it deal with the fact that we can continue pressing space and it'll still make it change direction. Okay?